Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Voices of Change. You have myself here, Gabe Martinez, and my wonderful co-host here, Ted Quinn, the
What up?
illustrious,
What up?
the profound, the man himself. Today we're going to be diving into a hot topic, nice topic, good topic in the month of June. It is PTSD Awareness Month, and we're going to just dive into a couple of different segments of what it is, what it means, how it can affect you, and how it can affect those around you in your life. We'll start us off with a couple of definitions, maybe share some stories here, but all in all, I want to be that voice of change. I want to bring reason, bring good tidings, but also good information that you can actually use and take actionable steps in your life to either see change, be the change, or create change in your environment, in your workspace, in your family, in your friend circle, all of the above. So, without further ado, I'm going to dive into it. But my friend Chet does have a disclaimer for you guys, real quick.
All right. So what's up, everybody? Thank y'all for tuning in and for listening to our episode 13. It's going to be about PTSD. And I think it's the month of July, actually, not June. But
Oh,
anyways,
my
summertime,
bad.
it's the summertime either way. But before we dive in, we just want to make it clear that we are not licensed therapists, psychologists, or medical professionals. We are just two people having an honest conversation about PTSD and how it can show up in different areas of life. Like it can be finances and social experiences. It can be work related, anything in general. So our goal is essentially just to have a conversation, raise awareness, share perspectives, and open the door for more people to talk about mental health in a real and relatable way. So if you're struggling, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified mental health professional. And if you learn something from this, that's awesome. That is the goal of what we're trying to do. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to you, Gabriel, to lead us on this conversation, and we'll be chiming in here and there. So let's go.
Let's do it, man. So, the first question, right? I'm sure we're all wondering. And if you're aware or not aware, you can also find all these resources and different information on Google. But what is PTSD, right? And so if you dive into the meat and bones of everything, it is first off, PTSD is a hyphenated short form for post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a mental health condition that arises after experiencing or witnessing so and so a traumatic event. Now, there's many different symptoms that this could be for you guys, or that could populate for you in your own life. Some include flashbacks, maybe nightmares. You might have severe anxiety and or uncontrollable thoughts about the said event that has happened to you. Um, Most often, PTSD does occur when fear and anxiety persist long after a traumatic experience, affecting daily life and your relationships that you have with people. Additionally, it is characterized by re-experiencing the trauma, avoidance of reminders, and heightened arousal. Right, and so the reason that why we wanted to talk about this topic and why this had came up, right? I know I work in a workplace where I do manage all different type of ethnic backgrounds, cultures, a very diverse group of people, and I came to my team and let them know it's like, hey, it is July, it is PTSD Awareness Month, and laid out a lot of the different definitions, resources that are available to people, and how it can affect us in the workplace, in our environment, and the way that we interact with one another. Now, one thing that's really important to understand is that with everybody, even myself and Tex, included. Tex is Kenyan. I myself am an American born individual. And that there's going to be different stressors that you experience throughout your life that will help to shape the individuals that you will become. And understanding where people come from in terms of like what they have gone through to get to where they're at today, and giving uh, I would say attention to detail in that regard can always help too. Not only bring people closer, but to give a deeper understanding of why someone or why you yourself may act in certain ways. Uh, I know that uh, in addition as well for quote unquote black men in the U.S., racial stress is something that affects you in like significant ways as well. I know, for example, like the chronic exposure to quote unquote racism and discrimination, it does create like additional daily stressors for African Americans, and as we as African Americans and uh, Africans that are American, race-based traumatic stress, right? It can lead to, also like psychological issues like depression, anxiety, and, what we have here as PTSD. Um, just something to be aware about, but also to take into consideration. I know for myself that one big thing that always pops up for me was like my culture shock coming from where I grew up, where there's a lot of people that look like me, to then moving on to higher education over at my college, and then being culture shocked by the predominantly white institution. I know that in itself for me was a sense of chronic exposure, and was a shock, and put me into a mindset. It's like, oh man, it's like what is it what is it fight or flight, like a fight or flight reflex in that regard, where it's like you don't know, it's unknown, and your previous experiences in quote unquote said areas have not been the most beneficial, or have not been met with the, I don't know, the same energy or same things that are going on in your own life. But Tex, what do you think about that? Like what comes to mind when you think about PTSD? Is there any like experiences or any type of examples in your life that you'd like to share?
Yeah, actually, first of all, I just want to give you credit for sharing that. And it's a topic that I think that needs to kind of be talked about because it's kind of nuanced in a way. And before I kind of get into my own personal kind of experiences, one thing that I would say, as part of Voices of Change, we focus also on kind of environmental aspect of things. And one thing I would like to say is like environmental trauma is something that's real. Environmental trauma refers to psychological impact of living in unsafe, unstable, or even high stress environments like communities affected by violence, neglect, natural disasters, or even systemic inequality. Like for example, right now in Texas, there's a whole floods is going on over there. Those people are going to now kind of have some level of trauma now. They might have trust issues with the current landscape, and they might not trust the weather people anymore. They might not know what's going on. And just growing up in a place where you never feel safe or supported can have lasting emotional effects, even if no singular traumatic event occurred, right? The other aspect I'm thinking about as well is financial stress can also trigger real trauma responses, even without like an official diagnosis. People who've lived through like poverty or job loss often carry emotional scars that show up as anxiety, shame, or even avoidance. And money problems aren't just logistical, they're deeply emotional and can affect how we see ourselves.
Mm,
Financial trauma can quietly shape how someone makes decisions. And something I learned while I was at UC Davis as well was that when I was in that area, I've never been exposed to some rich kids. They can do things differently versus how I can. So for me, my response to it was just like, okay, I have to make my decisions differently, but I don't have experience of how to make these decisions. So I kind of have to, it shaped how I trusted others or even how I felt safe for myself. And it's not just about like having money, it's about what constant financial pressure does to your mental health. Similarly, social trauma as well, like being humiliated, bullied, or excluded can leave lasting emotional wounds. Even if it doesn't seem dramatic, PTSD can reshape how a person navigates relationships or social spaces. Avoiding people or replaying painful interactions are signs of like unresolved trauma. Like for example, for myself, I I'm an introvert personally. I am an introvert personally. However, over time, I've had to adjust to becoming an extrovert in certain spaces because I have to find a way to be able to assimilate myself so I can feel like I'm doing something within the environment. But if you ask the real me, I'm an introvert. I just like to be quiet, keep it to myself. But kind of being in different environments has created this traumatic kind of response that I always have, to where I have to feel like, okay, I have to do this to just fit into this kind of environment. And avoiding people or replaying painful interactions have kind of come up in how some of the things I've reacted to. And what I would say is that, you don't have to be physically harmed for something to be traumatic. Often things come on from like trust issues, social anxiety, or, isolation stems from these kinds of experiences. Not all trauma is loud or obvious. Sometimes it's just quiet and invisible, but still very real. And trauma doesn't need to meet a clinical definition to matter. If it hurts you, if it changed you, then it's worth talking about, right? Even witnessing someone else's pain, like watching a loved one suffer, can be just as emotionally heavy as living through it yourself.
Mm,
Everyone processes pain differently, and every experience is valid, even if it doesn't look like someone else's. Like, for example, um, one of my family members is always going to the doctor appointments, and it's because of an illness that they've had, and that to me automatically just triggers a response, because now every time I see them not doing well, I'm just like I get super anxious. I get confused. I want to find different things to kind of distract me so I don't think about it. And that traumatic response is just based upon those experiences from kind of seeing somebody else's pain, to where you kind of internalize it to yourself. And that's another thing I would say personally for myself. I'm the type of person, I like to listen, but sometimes I listen too damn much. I can sit
mm,
there and I can listen to somebody's problems all damn day, because I think I'm a solution oriented person. Like, if I see a problem, I don't even like dwelling on the problem. I just like think about what are solutions, what are the options of what can be done to address this problem. And sometimes I find myself internalizing a lot of other people's problems, causing now a traumatic response to myself and how I react to when I have a problem, as well as how I react later on when somebody else comes up with another problem. So, it's something that looks nuanced from every different angle, but it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. If it hurts you, if it changed you, then it's definitely worth talking about. So that's what I
yeah,
kind of want to say about that, Gabe.
absolutely. Right on, right on, right on. One thing that you did pop out to me and that sticks with me right now is what you talked about, not only at the psychological different stressors that can cause PTSD, but the financial stressors. And a really big one that was made aware to me as well, being at UC Davis, was the inequality, financial inequality, and the difference between myself and my peers when I got to college, right? Is that like even those people that were, looked like me, that were black and, were playing on a football team, right? But came from a well-developed, well-supported home, came from, a situation where, they lived in the suburbs their entire life. They grew up around, uh, people that had things, that had access to resources. They didn't live in a food desert. And seeing the way that they, just the way that they move, the way that they walk around, they talk to people, the way that they, make decisions, right? It was all a learning curve for me. And I was shocked because, like, oh, I didn't understand at that time, but my environment had caused PTSD for myself. I was in defense mode the entire time because where I came from was entirely different, like, for example, um, seeing some like hearing about somebody getting shot or hearing about somebody dying, right, was quite common. Like where in my city I came from over Vallejo, like people are dying every day. You heard about, oh boy, he da 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 da, or oh he went to jail, or oh he was in juvie for like 3 years, or like some anything of the sort, and get into college where you know people yes deal with these same instances, but I learned that it was a lot more prevalent, for myself from where I came from, and um, shocking to say none the least. And one thing that also stuck out to me, from like I said about the financial stressors and psychological, is that you know not having those safe spaces, not being supported, but in addition as well, the systemic inequalities that you know are painted a certain way for certain groups of people, what those experiences bring out of you in your adult life, in your work life, and I see it every day, especially dealing with so many different people where I work, is that like where people come from, especially the Indian and Punjabi communities that I help to manage as well. They come from little small villages, very humble beginnings, and or you got people coming from the UK or Haiti, all type of places, and understanding that you know what may be something that is small for me now is something that is extremely large in respects to where they come from, what they do, and how they move around currently. For example, I like to greet all of my uh, every ethnic culture, in their language, right? So as I'm managing these people, I want to learn at least one greeting and just taking that step to understand and speak in their language, right? And to greet them, right? They have a sense of like, and what they shared is that it's not like a stress disorder, but more so, it's like bringing less stress to them because, someone's taking that necessary step that they, and not even necessary, they unwarranted, taking a step to make them feel more comfortable, in the workplace or where they come from. Doing that can also be a way to alleviate that, as I wouldn't say, I don't know what the word is, an advocate for peace, an advocate for change, being that voice of change, right? But that's just something that's interesting to me, something that's going on, and I wanted to share that. But also, when it comes to PTSD, one thing that we should understand, right, um, and I find that we want to make sure that we're aware about it too. Not only men, but also women, is that the different symptoms that show up, right? So one symptom that pops up, and there's a lot of them, but the one that I want to focus on is hypervigilance, right? So when you go through certain stressors and what have you, certain traumatic experiences, it may heighten your senses. It may put you in that defense mode. But there are other symptoms as well. Some like you said, flashback. You might have chronic pain, avoidance, guilt, anger, irritability. Problems concentrating, feeling panic, memory loss, nightmares, or hypervigilance. What I wanted to focus on was hypervigilance because that's something that I definitely had experienced, and I always bring it back to that the big change. When you change your environment, you change where you come from, and you move to a new city. You meet new people, right? Learning how to work together and move together in this new environment is in itself also a traumatic experience. But learning how to make that change and the stressors that were once regular to you, and making having stressors that aren't regular to you, that bring yourself into a new environment, it makes a change. You become that change. um I remember I back when, like, yeah, like when I got to college, I was so used to looking over my shoulder, so used to, I walk into a gas station. I don't even like walking into gas stations just because I knew what would come behind it. You always got somebody panhandling. You got somebody asking for money. You got trying to sell you something. You got individuals trying to sell you something. You have uh, you know, people that okay, they see you coming up, there's something nice. Now they ask some questions that I wanted from you. It 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 all adds up. And being in a space where quote unquote I felt safe in a way, where it's like, oh, I don't have to worry. No, there's no need to worry at all. Changed my entire perspective of life. I swear to God, I swear to you. And I just wish that everybody in one way could have that experience as well. Not necessarily a change in environment. You may not be afforded the opportunities to change your environment, but if you could change your perspectives of life, uh, or find a way to work through your your post traumatic, or that I wouldn't say disorder, but your traumatic experiences, it could paint a new picture for yourself. It could paint a new you for yourself. And everybody doesn't like change, you know, especially especially old people, if I be honest with you. Old people hate change, but uh you can teach a dog old tricks. They said they just have to be willing and acceptable and ready to take the actionable steps forward. So that I'll hop off my little piece there. You have anything that you wanted to share, Tex?
Yeah, it's you can never teach an. They always say you can never teach an old dog new tricks or something like that, which, people don't really like change much, and it's true. Sometimes I don't like change for myself, and I'll be like, no, I want to keep things like routine. Like sometimes you don't want to change routine because you feel like, oh no, it's gonna mess up how I feel. But sometimes a little change here and there is important. But something that doesn't really get talked about enough when we talk about trauma, especially financial, social, environmental, violence, whatever, is what you just said is hypervigilance. It's this constant exhausting state of mind of being on guard, right? And I think a lot of people who've grown up in high stress environments or unstable situations don't even realize they're living it, right? Because it's just normal for them, right? Like how you said, you just looking over your shoulder, like it was just a normal thing you would do, right?
All right.
And if you grew up like not knowing if the lights would stay on, or if a parent would lose their job, or if you were safe in your neighborhood, you learn early to scan for danger immediately, whether that's emotional, financial, physical, social, intellectually. Your nervous system stays on alert, waiting for the next thing to just go wrong. And I guess personally for me, like I am not gonna lie, I as much as I try to stay positive, I always find myself just being very pessimistic, just based upon just my own upbringings. Is just always making me ready to be like, what will go wrong? Because that's all I've known, that's all I've seen. And that doesn't magically stop just because you're in a better place later. Like you might make it to college, right, and still feel like you're bracing for impact, especially if you're surrounded by people who have never had to
Mm.
worry about money or survival in the same way. It can make you second guess every decision, overthink every interaction. Oh my God, I cannot say that one. I literally, every single person from the day I was out there in the real world myself, I would overthink every single thing I'm talking to somebody about. I'm like, God damn, why did I say that? Oh, do they want me to react this way? Oh man, like overthinking every interaction is kind of a way of how I would hyper um be vigilant about myself. And also like feel like you have to constantly perform just to prove like you belong, the aspect of the imposter syndrome. And,
Ooh.
socially, that hypervigilance might look like trying to read everyone's tone, watching people's body language, like your safety depends on it, because maybe at some point in your life it did, right? And sometimes you're just tired, but you can't relax. You want to feel safe, but your body doesn't quite believe you're safe yet. And I think we need to say out loud that this isn't weakness. Actually, this is not weakness. It's just how things are. It's your mind and body doing their best to protect you based on what they have learned over time. But living in survival mode every day, honestly, is very exhausting. And the truth is, healing starts with recognizing that you deserve to feel safe, even if your past didn't teach you that. So that's kind of what I just wanted to add on to that, Gabe, because there's a lot of different ways. Because I feel like PTSD is usually associated to just maybe people who have been at war or people who have just been in violence only, but there's a lot of other different components that PTSD actually has around it, because it's your post traumatic stress that you're responding to based upon what you have learned. And right now I've actually been part of as a peer leader with Mental Health California, and I've been learning about this slowly and surely, of how every single person's perspective is kind of a piece on how they're reacting in that moment. The way somebody reacts when you meet them is most of the time 99, I would say 99.9%. Don't quote me on this. I'm not an expert on this, but 99.9% of the time is probably because of what they have experienced in life is making them react the way they are reacting in that moment. So that's all I just say about that, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And thank you for sharing. You hit a lot of points there. And one thing I did want to ping off of is, well, you're saying about how what post-traumatic stress disorder was correlated with, I guess in the common man time, or what's going on today in social media, or in just history. And the whole PTSD diagnosis was actually created by the American Psychiatric Association in 1980, but they saw symptoms of these people, like a post-traumatic stress, really coming from military veterans, like you were saying, like stemming back all the way from like the Civil War, when you get shell shocked, or Vietnam, when you see people that you grew up with or that you train with, and they died right next to you, and you are that you got survivor's guilt because you're the sole survivor. And wow, it's funny because survivor's remorse, that's a real thing. I can't say that I've experienced that, but I've definitely dealt with some people that have dealt with that loss, and feeling like they should be gone too, that feeling like, oh man, why am I the only one? Oh man, I'm gonna take my life. Like, no, that's not necessary. I had to seek help. I'm not a professional here, but I definitely recommend, if you or somebody that you feel like that is feeling like that in that regard, please seek outside resources, outside tutelage to move you and push you in a better direction. But I wanted to ping off of that just because um, when you deal with certain instances of your environment, right? Where voices of change is big on the environmental change that we are trying to institute, but not only not only its future, but its present and its past as well. And it's funny. One thing that you were saying, about like internalizing the different problems, right? I think I'm the same way. I know that growing up, and then now growing into my adulthood at this point, I have kids now, and I myself understand and know that, of course, through going through therapy and talking with my therapist and what have you, counseling, which I recommend that everybody do, whether you like it or not, or whether you support it or not, talking to somebody professionally about stuff, and working through uh, your own history, your own events that you have gone through, and help to paint a better picture and pave your way forward, right? Because you're never going to understand how to move forward until you understand and learn from your past, and that's not only with your past, but the past of us as Black people, the past of us as the United States, the past of us as the world. You know, if you don't know your history, how can you move forward? And uh, circling back, is that understanding and internalizing not only the problems that I've seen, I witnessed around me, but the ones that I go through on a day-to-day basis and fight through myself, and taking the necessary steps to work through these internalizations so that I don't pass it on to my children. I would say there are certain things that you do, or that you go through, may be traumatic, right? I know I myself and my wife have gone through our fair share of things, working together, and understanding about these problems instead of just internalizing them, but speaking them out, and working in ways on how we can help to shape ourselves, so that our children can shape themselves in the image of us, having learned where we come from, where we are now, and where we are headed. So I
That's
think that's a big deal. Yeah.
I just want to first say I want to give you a big shout out for that, man, because that's what it takes to be a great father. And proud of you, man. Keep it up,
Thank
man.
you. Thank
And I
you.
do
Thank you.
remember
Thank
when
you.
you going to
Appreciate you.
therapy
Appreciate
and everything, man. It's all part of the process of just finding your own truth in who you want to be and how you want to be. For me, I don't have any kids myself, or as they would say, that I don't know of, but I know for sure I don't have any. um,
you.
but apart from
Yeah.
that, we also have to talk about you mentioned this about how social media and modern life play a huge role in how people experience and carry trauma today. Social media, in particularly, can be a constant trigger. You're exposed to other people's highlight reels while silently comparing them to your own struggles. For someone dealing with financial stress or social trauma, seeing images of success, luxury, or like perfect relationships can be a daily reminder of what they don't have or what they've lost. That comparison can deepen feelings of inadequacy, isolation, and shame. And beyond that, platforms can expose people to violent content. I know for sure I'd be seeing a lot of violent content, distressing news, or even personal attacks that leave, real emotional scars. And even just the pressure to always, be on, to perform, to keep up, to present yourself as doing fine. The reason people are posting, because those are the highlight moments. They're not showing you the real shit. They're only showing you the highlight reel for 60 seconds. That's it. And those things can be incredibly mentally exhausting when you're constantly exposed to them. And we weren't built to process this much stimulation, judgment, and information all at the same time. And for people already carrying unresolved trauma, this environment, can make healing harder. And it's already, it's like constantly having a wounded poke. It's like already kind of having a wound that's already poked at before it ever has a chance to close. And it's funny because I was watching The Shy, and there's a character in The Shy he's constantly getting shot up, but for some reason he keeps coming back, and he's always shot up, but he's always dealing with the trauma of, oh, this person's the one who shot me, I'm gonna go back and hurt him. He gets shot up again. It's like, when will he ever actually have a healthy body? Because every single time he comes back in an episode, something bad happens to him. He never healed those wounds. But just food for thought there. And then you had mentioned about kind of the history of how PTSD became to be what it is. I'm not an expert on this, but I want to kind of debunk some common myths around trauma and PTSD here, because a lot of people are silently suffering, thinking that their experience doesn't count or that they're just being too sensitive. And one of the biggest myths is that trauma only comes from major or extreme events like war or physical abuse. The truth is, I think trauma is about how an experience impacts you emotionally and psychologically, not just how big or dramatic it looks from the outside. And chronic stress from poverty, growing up in an unsafe home, bullying, social rejection, or even medical trauma can all leave deep emotional wounds. Another myth is that if it didn't happen to you directly, it can't be traumatic. But witnessing somebody else's suffering, like watching somebody get shot, that's going to leave a trauma. What? You watching somebody get shot? No.
Yeah. Real talk.
That is very traumatic. Or even watching a family member, or even a loved one go through like repeated hospitalizations, or living in an unstable household can absolutely be traumatic. It puts your body in a constant state of alert, worry, or helplessness. There's also this damaging belief that if you're still affected by something from the past, you're weak or you just need to get over it. But trauma responses like anxiety, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, or avoidance aren't signs of weakness. They're just survival mechanisms your body developed to protect you. And healing doesn't mean you're being dramatic. It means you're just giving your mind and body the care it needs. And some people think that if you're successful now, or if you're functioning on the surface, then your past couldn't have affected you that much. But success doesn't cancel out pain. You can be high achieving and still carry deep emotional scars. You can have all the money in the world, but you as a person, you're not happy. They say money doesn't buy happiness. I personally would like to argue that statement, because never mind, I'm not even going to get into that.
Because I can wipe my tears with dollar bills instead of toilet paper. Come on now.
So you can laugh, you can show up and do well and still feel broken inside. And finally, another point is that there's this idea that only people with like formal PTSD diagnosis have real trauma. The truth is that many people live with trauma symptoms like intrusive thoughts, anxiety, depression, or emotional detachment without ever getting diagnosed. And a lack of diagnosis doesn't mean a lack of suffering. Your pain is still valid. So if you ever caught yourself thinking maybe it wasn't bad enough, or I should be over this by now, just please know those are myths. If it hurts you, if it changed you, if it's still living in your body and mind, it counts. You deserve understanding, support, and a space to heal. That's the only thing I just wanted to add to that part of the conversation, Gabe.
I appreciate that. Well, I think we touched on a lot of points here. So I think it's about time that we do wrap things up. But without doing so, we have to hit our regular 3 for the founder.
Fire.
Yes, sir. So my number one for me, right, is that PTSD is real. And whether or not it is something that equates to a actual physical, diagnosis or physical event that happened to your life, it does things affect you, whether it be your financial stressors, the location and where you grew up, your environmental stressors, or the people around you and their experiences, not only your own, that have helped to shape you and shape you in the way that you cope with the world and the way that you defend, the body that you were given. Make sure that you're taking the necessary steps, right, to not only understand and maybe take a seat back to look out from a different lens, your own life and what has and has not been stressors and how you can continue to move forward, right? So not only can you help yourself, but you can teach others, lead others, and be the change, the voice of change that you want to see. Yes, sir.
All right, and hot topic final point that I have here: rest is not laziness; it's recovery. In a world that constantly pushes productivity and hustle, especially on social media, we've started to confuse rest with weakness. But for people who've experienced trauma, whether it's financial, emotional, or environmental, rest isn't optional. It's necessary for healing. Your nervous system needs space to regulate. Your mind needs quiet to process, and your body needs time to calm down from survival mode. So taking care of yourself isn't a luxury, it's resistance in a system that teaches us to ignore pain and keep pushing. So if you're tired, if you need to slow down, it's not because you're lazy, it's because you're a human being, and rest is part of the recovery. So that's my final point on hot topic for that.
And we like it, and we like it. Yes, sir. That was a good one. And then the last point to be the third piece for three for the founders. I want to piggyback off of something that you said, Tex, is that lack of diagnosis does not equal and equate a lack of suffering. There's a lot of people that are silently suffering by themselves, dealing with their own demons, dealing with their own, traumas, dealing with others' traumas, and taking it all on for themselves. Right? You're not alone. There's more. You're not alone. Everybody and all these experiences have already been lived. There's a way to you know traverse and move throughout that entirety in its entirety. Whether it's speaking to your friend, speaking to a therapist, writing it down, going on a walk, whatever it may be for you. Take a second to understand that you may just be the change that somebody needs to see. But in addition as well, you may just find that you need someone or something to be that change for you to see. So open your eyes, broaden your horizons, and in lieu of July, the month of PTSD Awareness Month, we hope that the information, experiences, and conversation that we have provided today can and will touch somebody, move them, and push them forward, not only to new starts, fresh beginnings, and great achievements. So, appreciate you all for tuning in today. Tex, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're at this part of the episode, we know this was a heavy topic, and if you're walking away with more questions or emotions that you came in with, that's okay. Talking about trauma, whether it's social, environmental, personal, takes courage, and just by listening, reflecting, or even quietly relating, you've already taken a step toward that healing. And remember, as Gabe said, your story matters, even if no one else saw it. Your pain is valid, even if you've been taught to minimize it. And your healing is possible, even if it doesn't look like anyone's else. And if anything we said today resonates with you, we encourage you to keep the conversation going with a friend, a counselor, or even just by journaling your thoughts. You're not alone in this. We're not medical experts on this. We just wanted to get the conversation going on this. I know there's plenty of conversations out there, but we just wanted to do this as part of our Voices of Change. So thank y'all for tuning in. And if you are interested to go like, subscribe, comment, share. Also make sure to go listen to us on the Alive Podcast Network, where you can listen to other Black hosted podcasts out there in the world that share great perspectives on different things, because everybody wants something to say. Everybody has an opinion. Just listen and take what you can. So for my end, until next time, take care of yourself, give yourself grace. Never forget healing isn't a straight line, and that's okay. We'll see you next time in the next episode. And that's what I'm going to say. Thank y'all. What about you, Gabe?
Appreciate you all for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast video today. And similar to what Tex said, be the change you want to see. Your options and your potential is limitless. Keep moving forward. And, thank you for tuning in. And without further ado, peace out.
We are the voices of change. Peace out.